In today's story, we dive into a tale of betrayal, revenge, and unexpected twists. Ryan Davis thought he was coming home from a routine business trip, but what he walked into was anything but ordinary. A shocking discovery leads to a dangerous game of deception, where trust is shattered and lives are forever changed. Get ready for a roller coaster of emotions as we unravel a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat. After 5 years, I found myself leaving a business show a day early for the first time. I work for a telecommunications company, and every year we participate in 3 big trade shows in different cities across the country, each lasting 5 days. We set up our booth on Sunday and Monday, and the show kicks off Tuesday morning, wrapping up at noon on Thursday. For the past 5 years, I'd worked diligently at every show, staying until the last box was packed and loaded onto the truck on Thursday afternoon. However, during the last show in May at the Las Vegas Convention Center, I twisted my ankle Tuesday night. Made it impossible to work the booth the next day. At lunch on Wednesday, my boss told me there was no point in staying if I couldn't work, telling me to book a flight home. Didn't need to be told twice. I was on a plane back to Denver by 2 o'clock that afternoon. Before boarding the flight in Vegas, I called home and left a message for Ashley, my wife of 9 years, letting her know I'd be home by 8 o'clock that evening. She'd been upset with me about something before I left on the trip, but didn't want to discuss it then, suggesting we deal with it when I got back. Despite the frustration of the sprained ankle and my boss sending me home early, I was glad to be heading back to figure out what was bugging her. When my cab pulled up to the house, I spotted a black Cadillac in the driveway. Didn't recognize it, didn't know anyone who drove a Caddy, and it bothered me a little that Ashley would have company over when she knew I was coming home. Figured she'd be anxious to get into whatever issue she thought we had. Stepping through the front door, I heard voices coming from the family room. Walked into the kitchen and peeked around the corner, and I got the shock of my life. Ashley was sitting on the sofa with my best friend, Kyle Thompson. That alone wasn't the shock. It was the fact that her blouse was unbuttoned that hit me like a ton of bricks. Neither of them had seen me yet. I walked through the kitchen and stood at the edge of the family room. What the? Ashley jumped a mile, startled by my sudden appearance. Ryan, what are you doing back so soon? She asked. Her expression, and the fact she didn't even try to hide the unbuttoned blouse, hinted that she'd been kinda expecting this moment. What's going on here, Ashley? I demanded. Honey, it's not what you think, she said with a nervous smile. I just stood there, trying to process the scene. The pain in my ankle flared, a sharp reminder that this was all too real. During the entire exchange, Kyle hadn't moved a muscle. He just stared at me with this amused smirk on his face. That's when I snapped. I didn't care how big Kyle was or how much my ankle hurt, I was gonna toss him out of my house. Took a step towards the sofa, and Kyle just stared at me with this amused smirk on his face. That's when I snapped. I didn't care how big Kyle was or how much my ankle hurt, I was gonna toss him out of my house. Took a step towards the sofa, and, suddenly, I was slammed from behind. This guy, seemingly out of nowhere, had me in a chokehold before I could blink. I could still breathe, but the threat was clear. Get it now, Ryan? Ashley sneered. We knew you'd be back. She went on about how Kyle had spilled the beans about my supposed actions at these business shows. Did you really think I'd never find out? Or that it wouldn't matter? She spat. I tried to get a word in, but the guy holding me clamped a hand over my face. A wave of some chemical stench hit me, and the room started spinning. Next thing I knew, I was waking up spread-eagled on the bed in the guest room. Wrists and ankles were bound tight with wire, cutting off the circulation. My ankle throbbed like it was on fire. For a second, I forgot about Ashley's words. Then I heard voices coming from the TV at the foot of the bed. It was Ashley and Kyle. Hope you're awake, babe. Ashley purred into the camera. Frankly, I didn't care what she was doing. Our marriage was over. My priority was getting free. My hands and feet were starting to go numb. Who knew how long they'd be busy? I couldn't wait. I started with my left leg, ignoring the pain as I strained against the wire. Yank, pause, yank, pause. Finally, it snapped. My ankle was bleeding, but it didn't look too bad. The right leg was tougher. The sprained ankle made it almost impossible to get leverage. When the wire finally broke, it took a chunk of skin with it. Now for the arms. I was able to get my left wrist loose, just some minor cuts, but my right was bound tight. Using my teeth, I started gnawing at the wire. Finally free, I stumbled to my feet. Blood was everywhere. The room was spinning, and a pounding headache was building behind my eyes. I could hear Ashley calling my name, but when I opened my eyes, I realized it was coming from the TV. "You watching this, Ryan?" On the screen, Ashley and Kyle. Well, let's just say it wasn't pretty. I saw red. For a second, I thought about grabbing something heavy and smashing the TV, but what good would that do? Besides, I was dizzy, weak, and who knew what that animal who jumped me was capable of? I looked around the trashed room, an idea forming. I saw red. For a second, I thought about grabbing something heavy and smashing the TV, but what good would that do? Besides, I was dizzy, weak, and who knew what that animal who jumped me was capable of? I looked around the trashed room, an idea forming. Ashley thought this was some kind of sick entertainment. Well, I'd give her a show. I swung my right arm, the one Kyle had twisted, towards the TV. Blood splattered across the screen. As I turned away, I caught my reflection in the mirror. A huge bruise was forming on my forehead, 4 distinct knots that looked like knuckles. Ashley had planned this whole thing. Had someone drug me, tie me up? The thought of grabbing a baseball bat flashed through my mind, but the dizziness hadn't fully faded. Plus, there was no way I could take on both of them in my state. Hurting them, maybe worse, that wasn't the way. But I could make them think it was. I smeared blood on the bedposts, the pillows. Then, I used my fingers to paint 2 bloody lines on the carpet, leading from the bed to the door. Across the hall, in the guest bathroom, I found gauze and tape under the sink. Make sure to wipe down the faucet, the cabinet door, anything I might have touched. Lucky for me, our master bedroom was downstairs. No chance of Ashley and her friend hearing me. Back in the guest room, I used what little first aid training I had to bandage myself up. Both ankles, left wrist, left the right wrist open for effect. I grabbed the cordless phone by the bed, making sure to get blood on it, and dialed 911. "Help, please. They're gonna hurt me." I gasped into the phone, laying it on thick. "Oh God, please?" Without hanging up, I let the phone clatter to the floor, along with the gauze and tape. Then, I slipped out the back staircase down to the garage. The Cadillac was still there. I swiped my bloody hand on the door handle, then pressed it against the trunk. Across the street was an empty lot. I ducked behind some bushes, found a good hiding spot, and waited. While I waited, I bandaged my right wrist. It wasn't long before the first police cruiser arrived. The wait was brief. Within 5 minutes, the first cruiser pulled up. 2 officers got out and headed for the house while a second car swung in behind them, those officers circling around back. One of the officers at the front door rang the bell. Waited. Rang again. Then, after a good 30 seconds, started pounding. The porch light flickered on, and Ashley opened the door. Even from across the street, she looked startled to see the cops on her doorstep. I was too far away to hear what was said, but I could imagine. The officers told her about the 911 call, and asked if everything was all right. Ashley, of course, played dumb. Said she was alone, no idea what they were talking about. The officers didn't buy it. Ashley stuck to her story. She was home alone, poor little thing. Her husband was out of town on business. Then, the 2 officers from the back returned, Kyle and Darnell in tow. "Look who we found sneaking out the back, ma'am," one of them called out. Ashley's composure crumbled. She slumped against the doorframe like her knees had given out. One of the officers helped her back inside while the others steered Kyle and Darnell through the door. Man, I wish I could have been a fly on the wall inside that house. I could just picture the look on Ashley's face when they opened the guest room door. Priceless. Part of me wanted to sneak across the street, try to get into the Cadillac's trunk while everyone was distracted. But that was way too risky. 10 minutes of tense silence hung in the air, then all hell seemed to break loose. 2 more cop cars showed up, sirens blaring, lights flashing. A few minutes later, Kyle and Darnell were hauled out in handcuffs, both of them yelling that they hadn't done anything to that woman's husband. They were separated into different cars and driven away. Meanwhile, other officers were going over the Cadillac. It didn't take them long to spot the blood on the door handle, then on the trunk. One of them fished a set of keys out of Darnell's pocket and popped the trunk. I kinda wished I'd been in the trunk when he opened it, but turned out, it didn't matter. The officer took one look and immediately called for backup. "We got guns and drugs here," he yelled to another officer who just arrived. 3 Mac-10s, and about a key of what looks like coke. Over the next 20 minutes, the cops photographed everything in Darnell's trunk and had the Cadillac towed. The cruisers with Kyle and Darnell took off, and it wasn't long before Ashley was escorted out in cuffs too. They put her in the back of a squad car and drove her away. A couple of officers stayed behind, taping off the front door with that yellow crime scene tape. That's when I knew it was time to go. I slipped through the empty lot to the street behind Ashley's house and stuck to the shadows, heading for a shopping center about 10 blocks over. There was a McDonald's there. By now, I knew I must have looked like a mess, blood-soaked bandages, that goose egg on my forehead. But I needed to get off the street for a bit. I had just enough spare change for a large coffee. Figured I'd stick out like a sore thumb inside, but this McDonald's was packed with folks who looked like they'd been through worse than me. Nobody even batted an eye when I sat down in the corner with my coffee. Sipping my coffee, I thought about Ashley, Kyle, and Darnell getting grilled down at the station. Couldn't help but crack a smile. They'd be asking where I was, and of course, none of them could say. Anything they did say would sound like a lie. Only problem was, how did I reappear without getting busted for filing a false report? By the time I finished my coffee, I thought I had a plan. When I went up to ask for a refill, the manager told me he'd give me one, in the house, if I took it to go. Fine by me. Coffee in hand, I started the long walk to a park I knew a few miles away. Kept my head down, ducked behind trees and bushes whenever a car drove by. My ankle was killing me, but I kept moving. Took me almost an hour to get there. I found a picnic table tucked away in a dark corner and just sat there until around 3 in the morning. Then, I ditched the bandages in the trash and went over to the far end of the park, laid down in the grass near a jogging trail. My ankle was throbbing, but somehow, I drifted in and out of sleep until the sky started getting light. I lay there as still as I could, hoping maybe I'd doze off again, waiting for what I knew was coming. This park was popular with joggers and people walking their dogs in the morning. It wouldn't be long before someone spotted me. I was right. Less than half an hour later, I was in the back of an ambulance, headed for Denver General. Of course, I'd left my wallet back at the house, on the nightstand in the guest room. When I got to the hospital, I played up the whole, dazed and confused, thing. Couldn't remember my name, couldn't remember what happened. Heck, I could barely keep my eyes open. Truth was, I was wide awake, just biding my time. It wasn't until almost noon that the cops showed up. I pretended to be out of it for another hour, just to sell it. Finally, around 1 o'clock, I figured it was time to give my statement. I'd rehearsed what I was gonna say, sticking as close to the truth as possible. No point in giving them a reason to doubt me. A plainclothes detective, this guy with tired eyes and a receding hairline, came over to my bedside. "Mr. Ryan Davis?" he asked. "Yeah, that's me," I mumbled, trying to sound groggy. "Look, officer, I don't know how much help I'll be. My memory's kinda fuzzy." "Just tell me what you do remember, Mr. Davis," he said patiently. "We found you in the park around 6 this morning. A man walking his dog called it in." I took a deep breath and launched into my story. Told him about coming back from Vegas a day early, walking in on Ashley and Kyle, how someone jumped me from behind, and then, blank. I think Ashley was yelling at me. I stammered, like I was struggling to remember. Couldn't breathe. They must have drugged me or something. 'Cause the next thing I knew, I woke up in our spare bedroom, tied to the bed. I showed him the marks on my wrists and ankles. It was awful, officer," I said, my voice catching in my throat. My hands and feet were going numb. I tried to get loose, but I trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Ended up just making things worse. I continued, shaking my head. That's when I noticed the TV was on. It was the bedroom camera. Ashley, she was? I shuddered dramatically, letting the detective fill in the blanks. It was Ashley and Kyle, right? And another guy? Yeah, big dude. Never seen him before. I glanced at the detective, gauging his reaction. I think I heard them talking about what they were going to do to me. After, it was kinda hard to focus, my head was messed up, but it sounded like they were gonna hurt me. I think they were hurting Ashley too. Like, they were gonna hurt us both. The detective's eyebrows shot up. Bingo. That's when I finally got free. I went on. Called 911. I don't know why I dropped the phone. Maybe I realized Ashley was in on it? I thought I heard her say something like, "Go take care of that idiot." I got scared. Had to get out of there. You don't remember anything after that? The detective asked. No, obviously, I got out. But I don't know how. Did they hit you, Mr. Davis? I hesitated. I don't think so. But like I said, it's all a blur. The detective scribbled something on his notepad. What's Ashley saying about all this? I asked casually. Your wife claims she found out about you cheating on her. Said she just wanted to teach you a lesson. She said I wasn't supposed to get hurt. He continued. That they were planning on letting you go after she got her revenge. Did she say how she found out about this affair? I pressed. The detective gave me a wry look. She said Mr. Thompson told her. Called you a stupid pig, actually. So, let me get this straight. I said, my voice laced with hurt. Her only evidence is the word of the guy she's screwing around with? I thought Ashley was smarter than that. I've never cheated on my wife. I stated flatly, looking him dead in the eye. If she'd just asked me, I could have proven it. The detective questioned me for a little while longer, mostly clarifying details, but he didn't seem to doubt anything I'd said. The next day, they released me from the hospital. When I got home, there was a message from Ashley on the answering machine. Begged me to come down to the station, tell them it was all a misunderstanding. She needed me to bail her out. I erased the message and grabbed a beer. The phone rang again. It was Melissa Carter, Ashley's friend. The one who'd gotten caught cheating on her husband and booted out. I never liked her much, never liked her influence on Ashley, and I had a feeling she'd played a part in this whole thing. Melissa wouldn't take no for an answer. Figured I might as well see what she wanted. An hour later, she was at my doorstep, telling me she'd just talked to Ashley. She's at her parents' place, Ryan. Melissa said. She says you were cheating on her during your business trips. That's insane. I exploded. I've never cheated on her in my life. She wouldn't go into details. Melissa said vaguely. Just kept saying it was all a big misunderstanding, and that you called the cops on her, got her arrested. I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. Let me tell you what happened, Melissa. I told Melissa the same story I'd given the detective. Most of it was the truth, after all, about finding Ashley and Kyle, the attack, waking up tied up, the whole 9 yards. She gasped and put a hand to her chest, but she didn't exactly seem surprised. Or, if she was a damn good actress. I can't believe it. She stammered. Ashley would never. She's been acting strange lately, but this just isn't like her. Maybe she's having some kind of breakdown? Are you going to talk to her, Ryan? She asked softly. Give her a chance to explain? Maybe, I said noncommittally. But why didn't she give me the same courtesy? If she thought I was doing something wrong, why didn't she just come to me about it instead of this? Did she ever say anything to you about this? About me, I mean? Melissa shook her head, all wide-eyed innocence. No, never. If she had, I would have told her to talk to you directly, Ryan. Right, like Melissa had ever been on my side. She'd never been anything but trouble where Ashley was concerned. I had a feeling she'd known about Ashley's little plan all along. I don't know what's gotten into her, Ryan. Melissa sighed dramatically. Just promise me you won't do anything rash until you have all the facts? Don't worry, Melissa. I won't do anything hasty, I assured her, my voice flat. She leaned in and kissed me on the cheek. Is there anything I can do? You've been a great help, Melissa. Really. I need some time to process all this, you know? The second she was out the door, I grabbed my phone and called the first lawyer on my list, a guy named Robert Carter. He agreed to see me that afternoon. At 2 o'clock sharp, I was sitting in Carter's office, laying out the whole sordid story. I want a divorce, Mr. Carter. And I wanted it yesterday. I want those papers served the second she's out of jail. Whoa, hold on a minute, Ryan, Carter said, leaning back in his chair. You sure you want to move this fast? I understand you're angry, but these things take time. Sometimes, if couples just... I knew what he was going to say. That old, sometimes marriages can be saved, spiel. Mr. Carter, I interrupted, trying to keep my voice level. After what I just told you, do you really think there's anything left to save? I want that divorce. Carter seemed to sense my resolve. All right, I can have the papers drawn up today. We can have them served first thing. Actually, I cut him off again, make it the day after tomorrow. And I'll need her parents' address. And her work, too. He eyed me curiously. The day after tomorrow? Look, I get it, you're hurting. But are you sure about this? Rushing things. Mr. Carter, if you're not willing to be proactive on my behalf, I'm sure I can find someone who is. He held my gaze for a beat, then nodded curtly. Very well. Day after tomorrow it is. Walking out of his office, I felt strangely numb. Except for my ankle, which was still screaming at me. Next stop, the bank. I cleaned out our joint accounts, canceled the credit cards, and opened new ones in my name only. Ashley might be entitled to half our money eventually, but I wasn't going to make it easy on her. Over the next couple of weeks, she tried calling. Left messages at home, even tried reaching me at work. I ignored them all. Then, Carter called. Ashley's lawyer got in touch. He said. It seems she's willing to contest the divorce unless you agree to meet with her. Give her a chance to tell her side of the story. I need some time to think about it, I told him. More than a month went by. Finally, I called Carter back. She still wants to meet? That's what her lawyer says. You sure you don't want to at least? Tell Ashley this. I'm not meeting with her, not like this. If she wants to contest the divorce, fine. But we're doing it on my terms. We'll remain legally married, but that's it. No calls, no visits, no contact whatsoever until she signs the papers. Make sure she understands that, Carter. I'll convey the message, he said, sounding slightly bewildered. Let her stew on that for a while, I thought, hanging up the phone. The next day, I found myself at Kyle's doorstep. His wife, Beverly, answered the door. I'd always liked her, quiet and sweet, nothing like Ashley or her circle. She invited me in, offered me a drink. We sat on the sofa, and she started apologizing for Kyle, the whole mess. Beverly, it's not your fault. I stopped her. Kyle made his choices, just like Ashley did. They're responsible for their own actions. She nodded, but I could tell she felt awful about the whole thing. I feel so terrible for what you're going through, Ryan. Then she said, kind of hesitantly, Maybe we could find some comfort in each other? I chuckled humorlessly. You know, Bev, if I'd met you when I was single? I didn't even finish the sentence before she leaned in and kissed me. Let's just say, one thing led to another, and we found ourselves seeking solace in each other's arms. Afterwards, as she was nestled against me, she whispered, I wouldn't mind doing this again sometime, Ryan. That was. She blushed. Well, it was nice. The following week, I got a call from the DA's office. It was Christopher Brown, the assistant DA handling Ashley's, Kyle's, and Darnell's cases. Mr. Davis, we got a statement from your wife's attorney, he said. Seems she's claiming you might not be pressing charges? Said you'd talked it over? That's not true at all. I haven't talked to anyone about dropping charges. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted to do about charges. Ashley had been in on it, but how deep did it go? Did she know they were going to drug me? Tie me up like that? I was pretty sure she did, but could I prove it? And who was the muscle, the guy who jumped me? Look, Mr. Brown, I said finally. You do what you gotta do with those people. I'm not asking for any favors. Turns out, they all got what they deserved. Darnell, with his trunk full of guns and drugs, got slapped with assault, kidnapping, and a whole mess of other felonies. Kyle pled guilty to assault and walked away with a slap on the wrist. A year in some country club prison. And Ashley? They charged her with conspiracy to commit unlawful restraint, which sounded like something they made up just for her. Kyle got a year in some minimum security prison, while Darnell was looking at serious time in a max facility. Ashley got off the easiest, probation. But even a slap on the wrist like that was still a felony. She couldn't contest the divorce anymore. Good riddance. I kept the house, kept what was left of our savings. Ashley was out of my life for good. Or so I thought. About a month after the divorce was finalized, Melissa called. Said Ashley wanted to see me, to explain herself, to apologize. Part of me didn't want anything to do with her, but I was curious. Melissa, bless her meddling heart, convinced me to hear Ashley out. We met at a bar downtown, a dimly lit place with booths lining the wall. Ashley practically slid into the seat across from me, relief and gratitude oozing out of her. Ryan, thank you for seeing me. Her voice was shaky, like she was about to cry. She launched into an apology, the whole, I messed up, I'm so sorry, routine. Said she'd just found out about my affairs, that she'd been hurt and angry. Ashley, I interrupted, my voice flat. I never cheated on you. She looked genuinely surprised. Then, she backpedaled, said that at the time, she believed Kyle. That she'd been so blinded by hurt and rage, she wasn't thinking straight. You were already accusing me of something before I left for Vegas. I pointed out. Remember? You said something was bothering you. I should have said something then. She admitted. I just needed time to process it. Process it? I scoffed. Ashley, you took Kyle's word for it, didn't even bother asking me? And then, that stunt you pulled? That was your idea of processing. For God's sake, Ashley, he's a lying, cheating scumbag. And his friends? Drug dealers? You really thought those were the kind of people you could trust? Ashley's face flushed. She looked away, then mumbled. We slept together, Ryan. The night before you got back. And Darnell? That was just to add insult to injury? I asked, disgusted. Did you really think I'd just forgive you for all this, Ashley? I asked, unable to keep the incredulity out of my voice. She looked at me, eyes wide and pleading. Don't you see? It was supposed to even the score. So we could move on. I laughed bitterly. Even the score? Ashley, you never even caught me doing anything. You just decided to take revenge. Tied me up, drugged me, made me watch you. My voice cracked with anger. That wasn't about evening the score, Ashley. That was about humiliating me. Most people would have just walked away. Maybe had an affair of their own. What did you do? That went way beyond. She started to cry, big, fat tears rolling down her cheeks. Please, Ryan, just give me another chance. I love you. I've always loved you. You're the only man. What I did with Kyle, with Darnell, it didn't mean anything. It wasn't love. Just tell me what I can do to make you love me again. Anything. She looked up at me, hope flickering in her tear-filled eyes. It was almost pitiful. Almost. Do you really mean that, Ashley? Anything? I asked quietly. She nodded frantically, brushing tears away. Yes, anything. I meant it. I slid out of the booth and leaned down, placing a hand on her shoulder, bringing my mouth close to her ear. Drop dead. Her head slumped onto the table, her sobs echoing in the dimly lit bar as I turned and walked away. 7 months later, Beverly and I were married. And that's how Ryan's life took a dramatic turn, from betrayal and heartbreak to finding unexpected love in the most unlikely of places. This gripping tale reminds us that even in the darkest moments, there's always a chance for a new beginning. As Ryan and Beverly start their new chapter together, it's a powerful reminder that sometimes, the best revenge is moving on and finding happiness where you least expect it. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Stay tuned for more stories that will keep you captivated until the very end.